which resources do you need in order to learn?
So I think that this really spoke to me because we don't have lots of resources developed specifically connected to what we're doing in APS. So I go out there and I go on the hunt to find out information, but there's not a lot of models, particularly specific models that we can use currently that we have found that we can base what we're doing, what we're creating here in APS. So this is sort of a challenge, and I guess that I'm giving myself and that the district faces in trying to develop this, but then also like it's super exciting because we're sort of bulldozing this path that maybe we're developing the resources that others are going to pull from.
Yep.
So
what kind of resources do you generally look for?
I think that originally when I started this, it was like, well, what is digital badging inside of a school? And there wasn't much out there.
Yep.
And so the research that the team had done before, they had found some models in other school districts and it had really worked for them, but it wasn't explicitly measuring 21st century skill development. So it was, you came to the summer program, so we're going to badge you for that. Or you received this grade on your ACT, so we're going to badge you. Or we're in a private school with 300 people and we're badging so many different things, but there's 300 people and we're paying teachers extra to implement this.
Yep.
So I guess then it's how do we pull information that's useful from that to come here to APS to create a prototype that we can try with our users. And I mean, I'm always still kind of on the hunt,
for great resources.
For great resources. I mean, Noah is a great resource because he's kind of the connection to everything that's happening outside of the district. He just has a pulse on, I met this person and they're doing this and they're doing this. And so I'm able to sort of take that information from him and apply it to some of the work that we're doing. Or him talking to Josh and saying, I just spoke to this great endorser that could potentially be a connection or a partnership with us.
So that resource almost sounds like a person, right? Like the resources you need is this connector who is able to connect you with other things. Do you feel like that's a role that we need to see more within our schools, of that connector?
Yeah, I mean, some of our schools definitely are a little disjointed or maybe separate. Like they don't quite know what are all these employees that the district hires, like what's their role? And I can't tell you how many schools I go in and they've never heard of badging. They have no idea. This is teachers.
Sure.
No idea what the strategic plan is. Like that is like a word, I say it, and they're going, what? And so there's not a connection to that. Or the fact that they have a learning community. I was in a teacher's room a couple days ago, I think on Wednesday or something. Like one of their first days when they were back.
Yep.
And she had no idea which learning community that she was in or that she had a learning community.
Sure.
So the idea that a district is set up in learning communities and you have support staff that are gonna, support your needs, that she was like, what? You're the first person I've ever seen in my room to help me with something. So
when I think about that idea of that we have resources that we don't know about, right?
Yeah.
Like you are actively seeking out resources. But I also wonder about what are the resources that we just don't know, because we haven't had that experience of someone coming into my classroom or things like that. How do you feel like we should better support teachers and leaders in finding the resources that already they have access to, but they don't know exist?
I wonder if, so I know that schools right now are going through, and dependent upon, I think it's stage 1, 2, 3, like, is that how it's labeled?
Depending on what we're talking about, but stage 1, 2, and 3 of plans and things like that.
Yeah, so I wonder if those schools who we know, okay, they're within the stage and their goals within their own planning are that they're going to access these things. So we're going to pull in more MTSS support with our RTI interventions or something like that. Or we need some assistance within credentials. That to me is one opening that's very like top-down approach to opening, but that is sort of the way, that is the school saying, okay, these are things I'm going to work on. So then we can sort of come in, and say, we're able to assist you like within that process. So that definitely seems like one way to like get yourself in there. But I think too, it's just like word of mouth and sort of, and I know that sounds silly, but the teachers that, like I just worked with a group in Arkansas, I had about 5 teachers there, And the reason that this whole team was there is because I had an interaction with another teacher, and she said, I have to bring my whole team in and meet you. They're going to love you. But how do we become more intentional about that? I don't know that answer yet. I mean,
But it almost sounds like it's supporting teachers and sort of raising their hands, or leaders and saying, yes, I do need support for this because I'm trying to solve this problem.
Yeah.
And so going back to your example here of where you are researching or searching to find an answer, right? We all do that.
Yeah.
It's how do we, when we don't find that answer, then raise that up to others and look for the connection points. Do you feel like there is a better way that we could be supporting teachers and leaders in sort of saying, I need support, I would like to solve for this problem, but I don't know how, or like, I just need more people on my team?
Mm-hmm. You put me on the spot.
And it's okay that if you don't
Yeah.
have an answer to that, because I think that there is this aspect of resources and how do we best apply our resources, right? And to needs specifically.
I wonder if sometimes for me, so I went on adventures at the beginning of last year.
Yep.
And it wasn't until I went on some of those adventures that I understood a little bit more about the digital badge program, which seems silly because they're not badging,
right?
But they're creating something. It's being birthed from innovativeness, basically. I don't know.
Sure,
like
sure. So I really love the idea that almost just through exposure to other ideas, you can connect and understand more about your own situation, and that you can you are better situated and able to ask for the supports that you need because you see that as an option elsewhere.
Can I tack on something
yeah,
to that?
Please.
Something that I find interesting, and I brought this up in a listening session last semester with John, I believe. So the team of Equity and Learning, and maybe not everyone, but a big chunk of us went on all of these adventures, had this great experience, and then we come back here, and because there is an even larger percentage of people that have not, you don't really see that culture change wasn't necessarily apparent last year. And I know that it takes a while to change the culture of something, but to throw an example in there, we're writing on Windows because let's get out of the office and collaborate somewhere else that's going to make us not feel like we're sitting in an office.
Sure.
And then emails are being sent out and we are getting yelled at because we're writing on Windows. So, like, how do we change the culture if the custodians or those who are in charge of maintenance, if they don't know about this culture change, then it's sort of hindering us. And so then a lot of people might read that and say, I'm not going to do that anymore because I don't want to get in trouble. I mean, I don't want them to see me writing. And I was hearing conversations, I would say frequently, of people saying, why are people writing on the walls? Like, that's making a mess. And so how do you make sure that trickles down? Because we're obviously not going to take everyone on adventures. You know, that doesn't maybe make sense. But if I'm the only one getting the message, or if I come back here and we're still in cubes and isolated spaces,
sure,
or I'm even in an office in an isolated space, how we have to model those things, and not just through our own practice and thinking and speaking with others. So it's got to be something tangible, a space, whatever that is.
Right, and I also think that what you're talking about is how do we share the learning that we've had, right? Like, especially, so let's say that you have found these resources, you've created something, but how are you then sharing that so that other people can learn those same things or can extend that and build upon it? That communication side of things too, and the way in which we're sharing our own learning. How do you share your learning?
So we're fortunate enough that we have a really well-developed badge leadership team, and it's going to be changing slightly this year, but we were able every week to come together and share findings with each other. And so that was a really safe space to talk about, I was doing this and I tried this. And that's the one space where I think I'm able to share out what I'm doing, what I've learned, what I found, even through like a bright spot. This is what happened in this school because of this practice potentially, or here's a video that highlights some amazing feedback I got from students. So that became a great place to share. There was no really formal way outside of our team that I've been sharing information though. Like that was set up as a space to share and get feedback, this team, to drive the work of the program. But there's not many other spaces, I would say, where something like that functions in that same way. So it could be, hey, I would love for you to come and join me on this, or have you heard about, but just informal,
Love that. And so by setting up the structure for sharing, then the learning increases and the culture changes.
Yeah, I would agree.
Nice. All right, well, let me shift us to thinking about your questions. What are the big questions that you're constantly wrestling with, or maybe just one?
My question is really connected, and this is centered to my own position. Is that fair to ask?
Of course.
I don't want it to make it seem like my program is the center of the universe. I guess the thought is, since we are, we're putting this big emphasis on credentials, what are we going to do to enable that this program, is consistent and can continue to grow within schools, and that all teachers can potentially be supported with this work? And I mentioned earlier about the hope is to bring in the rest of the post-secondary workforce readiness coordinators, and that this role will become theirs. But it seems like, as this has become a huge focus of the district, that it's almost its own bucket, even though the work is together. Can we really expect someone whose job it is to ensure that a plan is carried out in all those schools, which is goal one? Are they also going to be in charge of, and I want to make sure that everybody in your school has credentials? Like, if we're putting this huge emphasis on the strategic plan, is it fair to ask one team or one person to make that work happen?
Can we just say no and be done with it?
Yeah.
Okay.
See ya.
I think that question is really valuable in thinking about the way in which we actually share the resources in order to most effectively implement badging, credentials, plans.
And you talked to Nick, for example, Steinmetz. He was my ed tech coach before I came into this position. And even if I was implementing something that he gave me, I needed his support continuously throughout the year. Because if I didn't meet with him, then I kind of took what he had taught me and I was like, I'm done. I have the information that you've taught me. However, if he came into my classroom every month, I was always implementing something new. And so I think that maybe in the beginning we were thinking of, once a teacher knows how to badge, he or she is going to continue and they don't need a badge partner. So that's how you mitigate the risk. Once somebody's been trained, they get it. That's not what we're seeing right now, is that teachers really need that support. It's not a concrete enough idea or something that is ingrained into their minds yet, where they can say, you've taught me, I'm good to go. You don't need to come here anymore. I'm going to badge everything that's happening in my room. So will we go there? We totally could. I don't want to say that we can't. That's just not what I've seen currently. In practice with teachers, if I'm not working alongside them, they're not badging their students. So,
well, and I think the idea of support and structures of support is an open question, right? Like, what are the right structures of support to ensure that that kids have the skills that they need and that those skills are badged? And I think the ways in which we sort of go about answering that is through doing work directly with teachers, is really in sort of building out, you were talking about prototypes earlier, but building out prototypes and working them with schools and with leaders. So I'm really excited and sort of interested in this area of sort of the open question of how should we best support teachers and leaders in X, right? In badging, in supporting the strategic plan, like all of these different things. When we're solving for X, it is about the structure of support that best does that. And so this has been long enough. We're okay to wrap here, but I really appreciate your thinking and your leadership in that regard, in sort of helping to define those supports. I think that's really great. Thank you.
You're welcome.